Welcome to Taking Stock. We all had our heroes, I guess. At least most males of the human species have, and with most males in a Western culture, I guess it's a sports hero if not a military one. When I was a child, almost every boy wanted to be George Best or Bobby Charlton, two of the best footballers in the First Division in the 1960s. Personally, my football hero was the Tottenham Hotspur goalkeeper Pat Jennings. I particularly remember one incident from the 1967 FA Cup final against Chelsea. Tottenham were, I think, 1-0 up at the time, when the Chelsea winger, I think it was Bobby Tambling, but I wouldn't swear to it, put over a tricky cross from the left which was drifting across the front of the penalty area. Jennings came out to the edge of the penalty area, jumped and caught and controlled the speeding ball cleanly in midair with one hand. I longed to emulate that feat. The fact that I was only 10 years old did not prevent me from trying the same trick when playing for the 15th Chingford Onaway Cubs football team on the opening game of the following season, in the glamorous surroundings of the cowpat-bestrewn football pitches of Chingford Plain. A cross came over from the left and I rose like a salmon to meet it. I could easily have caught it with both hands, but oh no, I was going to be Pat Jennings, so I caught the ball with one hand, just like my hero. And then I dropped the ball right at the feet of an advancing forward who gleefully tucked it into an empty net. We lost the game 1-0. Some years later, when I was in my mid-20s, I met Pat Jennings. He was playing for it's no good, I can't say it. He was playing for that other team in North London by then, traitor. And I had taken the young son of a friend of mine who unaccountably supported the Gunners to a match at Highbury as a post-hospital treat. The other team in North London had kindly arranged for him to get into the famous Marble Halls after the match against Crystal Palace, another boring 1-0 I think, to meet the teams, and of course I had to go with him. Pat Jennings came out of the dressing room, greeted my young companion and shook my hand. He had hands like hams. At the age of 25, at 6'1" and 12.5 stone, my hand disappeared into his massive palm like a ferret down a rabbit hole and was completely enveloped by his enormous fingers. 15 years on, I finally discovered why it was he could catch a speeding crossed ball in one hand and I couldn't. Realisation crystallised in my mind why it was that I would never play for Spurs in goal. At some stage in our lives, it does dawn on us that we're not going to be leading either our team or England out onto the hallowed turf at Wembley in the FA Cup or World Cup final. But virtually every boy who ever plays football on the street or in the park does so with a running commentary going on in his head. Sometimes he even provides his own commentary out loud. You and I might see a small boy running around another small boy in the local park before toe poking a partially deflated plastic ball between two jumpers laid out on the grass. What the small boy sees is different. Depending on the era, he'll hear John Motson, Barry Davis, Kenneth Wolstenholme, Brian Moore, David Coleman or Martin Tyler waxing lyrical. Sooner or later, of course, the image fades and the commentator falls silent. You know you're getting old when you are playing football in the park and you are no longer wondering which hero you're going to be today. But you are wondering whether you're going to get through the game without a coronary thrombosis. I'm not alone in growing up with dreams of glory. We all need heroes when we are children. We all need role models. Dreams, no matter how unrealistic, are important in our development. Insofar as we're able to judge, it would seem that the ability to visualise something that is yet to happen is one of the abilities which separate us from the rest of the animal kingdom. Eventually we learn, though, that sooner or later we have to grow up and let the dreams of glory die, because if we nurture unrealistic dreams, they have the capacity to incapacitate us. The trouble is, and maybe this is just a male thing, that in our heart of hearts the dream doesn't die. It just lies dormant like an old volcano. At crucial moments, the volcano erupts, usually with disastrous consequences. If we continually yearn to be someone else, we never discover who we really are. Now, in the wider world, and especially in the realms of faith, if we nurture unrealistic fantasies of who we think we ought to be, or just as significantly, who we think that others think we ought to be, we lay a trap which prevents us from fulfilling who we really are. If we stop to think about it, we know that unrealistic fantasies of who we would like to be are just that, fantasies, incapable of realisation. The tragedy is that we then tend to equate fantasies which are inherently incapable of realisation because they project onto the screen of our subconscious minds images which have no basis in reality at all, with aspirations or even visions. We're not taught in this secular age, though we have tantalising glimpses of it, that it's possible to hold to a vision of how things might be in order to change the way things are without distorting our knowledge of who we are now. When I was 7, my friends and I went and saw the Beatles film A Hard Day's Night at the local cinema, and were much struck by the scene in which the Beatles were pursued out of a mainline station by hordes of screaming girls. After the film, we 4 7-year-olds came racing out of the cinema at top speed, looking back over our shoulders just like the Beatles had in the film, pretending that we were the ones being pursued. I really wanted to be Paul, but even at the age of 7, I pretty quickly worked out that I never was going to be. I suppose at that stage of my life, talent notwithstanding, it was possible that I could have done what he did and starred in a world famous pop group if I worked at it and got the breaks. It would have worked too, if only I'd learned to play more than 3 chords on the guitar before I was 17. Mind you, that never stopped status quo, did it? There's a difference between fantasy and vision. Fantasy only thrives by being totally divorced from reality and is easily dismissed, like a kind of emotional candy floss, cheap and easy to consume in large quantities, but if left, soon deteriorates into nothing. Vision can only be fostered against a background of reality, wherein a person's true awareness of his or her genuine self serves as a platform upon which to build towards the accomplishment of vision. Modern Western society encourages fantasy and tends to dismiss or crush vision, perhaps because fantasists are easier to control than visionaries. Belief in God and in the power of the man God chose to be the perfect reflection of his nature, Jesus, has been successfully bracketed as fantasy. Jesus, if he's mentioned at all at Christmas nowadays, is firmly placed in the same category as Santa Claus. And we all know the truth about Santa Claus, do we not? Jesus thus becomes a dream figure in a fairy tale, going about doing good, healing, feeding, dying and rising again, and all against a background of candy floss emotions which make him as relevant as a Walt Disney cartoon. Easy on the eye and a pleasant diversion on a wet afternoon, but irrelevant and ultimately unfulfilling. We do not learn how to separate our dreams and visions from our fantasies, and consequently we find it difficult to deal with things as they really are, and often collude in burying our true selves under the weight of society's expectations of us. It's because we're so good at deceiving ourselves that we become almost incapable of discerning that which is capable of realisation from that which is not, and subsequently excuse ourselves from the need to aspire to anything. We sink into a spiritual morass from which it's difficult to extricate ourselves, even though the dream of what could be still lurks deep down, often too deep consciously to be retrieved. but just near enough the surface of our lives to make us deeply uncomfortable when faced with the obviously holy. I truly believe that it's because we don't teach people to separate dreams from aspirations, to understand the difference between what is attainable and what's beyond reach, that many people are put off the idea of religion, and particularly Christianity. One of the great truths of Christianity, however, is that if someone truly opens their eyes to what God is saying in the life of Jesus, the person will come to understand, to know, that what God gives us in Jesus is not merely a lovely dream, a dream which will always remain just that, a dream. God offers us in Jesus a life to which we can aspire, no matter with what materials we first start, in terms of skills, talents, or personal spiritual attributes. John's Gospel, right at the beginning, gives us a one-line manifesto for the Son of God. To such as believed in him he gave the power to become children of God. Not, you'll note, to such as had the right attributes, or to such as were rich, or even to such as were deserving, but just to such as believe. The power of Jesus' promise gives us the freedom we need to become who we truly are before God, and to achieve all that's possible for us to achieve. We are free to live wholly in God's love, because Jesus shows us that God loves us how we are, and not in any conditional sense at all. He doesn't love us because we follow his precepts, his law of love. He loves us, and in recognition of that love, we obey that law and then discover more of his love for us in the fulfillment and freedom that obedience brings. For we are truly free, free to the depths of our souls, when we realise that self-worth comes as a gift of God and is not dependent at all on how we are viewed by society, but on how we understand ourselves to be viewed by God. And Jesus, whom we recognise as God in his human aspect, viewed us as worth dying for. We are free then, free to discover what it is about ourselves, our personalities, which God thought was important enough to die for. We are free too, in Jesus, to fulfil what and who we are. Quite literally, we're saved. Saved from sinking into the sort of apathetic spiritual swamp which covers everything in such a sticky slime of evasion and pretense that we're unable to distinguish the dross of our lives from that which is valuable, to tell good from evil. A swamp which swallows all that we are and drowns us in mediocrity. The mistake I made at the age of 7 playing football for the 15th Chingford Honourway, Cub Pack and Chingford Plains was not that I tried to play like Pat Jennings. It was that I didn't try and play like Alan Jenkins. It's not a sin never to have possessed as much talent as your neighbour, but it is a sin not to use as much talent as you do possess. The forest would be very silent if no birds sang there but those who sing best. I cannot sing like Luciano Pavarotti. I can't preach like John Wesley. I can't play guitar like Eric Clapton or Joe Bonamassa. I can't play golf like Rory McIlroy, and I cannot keep goal like Pat Jennings. But when I come before the throne of grace, the Lord Almighty is not going to ask me, why weren't you Pat Jennings? He's going to ask me, why weren't you Alan Jenkins? Stay safe, people.